Hello, product people. Welcome to the Product for Product podcast, hosted by Matt Green, data advocate and product manager, and Masha Mikanovsky, product leader and author. Our goal is to serve the product community by helping you find products that can help make your work in product management easier. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Product for Product podcast.
Welcome back. In today's episode, Michelle and I are thrilled to be speaking with product management coach, speaker, and author Itamar Gilad about his new book, Evidence Guided. So let's dive in. How you doing, Itamar?
Very well. Thank you for the invitation. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you. Hello, Michelle.
Hey, Matt. Hey, Itamar. So welcome to the show. We're excited to have you here. You have your book behind you, which is great. This is video only, but
audio only.
I'm sure that by now, people already have heard about your book, and some of you have bought it like me. So I got it right here, and of course, I read some of it. I must admit I didn't have time to finish it, but I actually follow you for some time now on LinkedIn and other places, and read your posts and stuff like that. So I was familiar with the framework in the book. But let's start first with you. Tell us about yourself, Itamar.
So as I said, right now I'm coaching and I'm presenting and I'm writing about product management, but that is based on the first 20 years of my career, where initially I was an engineer, and then I moved kind of to the dark side, and I spent 15 years in product management. Dark side for engineers, right? Anyone who's not a coder is a little bit
right.
And then I became kind of a consultant, which is maybe a step even into the darker side of things. But during these 20 years, I realized that a lot of what I was working on wasn't actually making any difference. It was nice. We launched it. We celebrated it. But most of the time, nothing really changed for the users, for the customers, for the business. It was just yet another launch. And I became kind of frustrated with that. So kind of my journey led me to Google, because I was really interested to see how Google generated this kind of stream of successes. We're all using their products daily. I'm completely dependent on them. And that was a journey in its own right. I spent 6.5 years in Google, and I learned a lot of new things I didn't know. And then when I left, I kind of tried to bring some of the best ideas I found inside Google to my clients. And that was another journey of learning, because I realized not everything that works at Google will work in company A or company B. The reality is very different. So I was forced to generalize and to come up with frameworks and models that help my clients get the benefits of things. And the book is the culmination of all of that. It's basically putting everything I learned into one book. And here we are.
Nice. And very interesting that you consider this the dark side. I actually went through exactly the same transition, much slower than you. So, engineering, product management, and only this year I started into consulting. And I actually see it as going into the light side. So
you are creating impact, but in different ways.
Yes,
right.
Absolutely.
That's
absolutely. Right. Nice. So that experience at Google, and you write about it in the book, is really cornerstone there, or like seeing the light there about how some great companies can do that. And from our experience, what we're hearing from people and our personal experience, we do see that most companies are not like that. So tell us a bit about, in very high level or the quick story about what did you see at Google that was so different from what other people what you knew before?
So I have to preface this that even Google is not like you think Google is. And
of course,
the very first thing you will read in the book, in chapter 1, is a story of where Google kind of made a misstep and launched this giant project, spending I don't know how many millions of person weeks, and called Google Plus. Yeah, the attempt to do a social network that is very Facebook-like and basically fight Facebook in its own kind of turf, which took years and years to fail, and eventually it did fail. And That's an example where even Google doesn't do the googly thing, in my mind, not the classic DNA.
Right.
Yes.
And
Yes.
of course, it's a very rich and diverse company, so it can fall in these ways and still survive, still thrive. For most companies, that's not possible. So just throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks is not a good policy for most companies. Most companies, I think, should try to do what Google used to do, and what I still observe within Gmail, where I spend most of my time in Google, which is to try to balance opinions, even if they come from the smartest people or from a group or from a consensus or from the industry, with evidence. So, and that entails a bunch of things. It's a really big change, but it entails experimentation, it entails good goals, it entails good prioritization of ideas, and it entails also a change in the way the team works and the way that the stakeholders and the managers work. So everyone needs to change. And yeah, it's not an easy change. So that's why I think we needed a book. I can summarize it, but it's basically will be following my GIST model. That's kind of maybe a lead to it. So if you guys are interested, I'm happy
Absolutely.
to.
Yes.
I was going to ask about that. Let's go for it. Yeah.
So taking just a step back, I see like 3 areas of major activity. There's strategy, mission, strategy, etc., which is not strictly covered by the book, but it's very, very important. There are some mentions of how I recommend doing it in chapter 6. There's research, user research, market research, competitor research, technology research, super important as well. Not covered in the book per se, but highly recommended to do it. But then when you get to a state where you've done your research and you have your strategy, you are in a good place to start creating goals and connecting the strategy into goals. And that's the first layer of GIST, goals, ideas, steps, and tasks, my main framework. And the goals have to be about the outcomes you want to achieve. At the company level, it's yearly goals that state these are the 3 things we have to achieve this year. 3 objectives with a handful of key results, maybe 4. Try to keep it at that. If you're a massive company like Google, all right, so all your business unit goals trickle up and you have much larger sets of goals. But inside the business unit, again, try to do 3, not 15. A lot of companies struggle with this. So the chapter about goals try to provide a model basically. How do we measure success? How do we measure how much we're moving towards the mission? And that's called the value exchange loop. So we need to give value to the market and to capture value back.
Right.
I'm rambling on, but stop me at any time if you have questions.
Sure.
And then the next step is to put metrics on these 2 parts of the mission. So capturing value, what does it mean? What do we value the most this year, for example? Is it revenue? Is it number of active customers? Is it profit? Whatever it is, let's name it. Let's say this is the most important thing. Look at Amazon. They sacrifice profit for decades, basically, for growth in number of transactions. That was their key metric. It was very obvious to everyone. That's the key business metric, and everyone worked towards that. So having this clarity of mind is part of goals.
Maybe a quick question about that. Do they do it, or would you recommend doing it on a yearly basis, a quarterly basis, or it's both?
I think it's something that probably doesn't change every year, but definitely needs to be discussed every year. What is it that we're chasing now? If you're still a private company, you need to get to your next round of funding, or you need to make an IPO, you need to hit some target. It could be market share target, or it could be revenue target, whatever it is. Name it. Explain clearly to the company, this is what we need to achieve this year. And give them some context, explain why. It's not just that we sat in a room and decided. There's a clear reason why this is the most important thing. And it doesn't mean we don't care about profit, but we are willing to make trade-offs when it comes to that. So that's half of the loop. The other half, and potentially even more important, a lot of companies consider that metric the most important. It's called the North Star metric. And that measures the total amount of value we create for our market. Sounds ridiculous. How do you measure value delivered? But it turns out it's a very practical tool. So for example, WhatsApp always measured messages sent. because every message sent is a little increment of value. It's free, it's rich media, you can send it from anywhere in the world to anyone. So it's very different from SMS that preceded it. So in general terms, if in year one we sent 1 billion messages through WhatsApp, and in year two, 2 billion, we can say we roughly doubled the amount of value we created.
Now I understand why they didn't release an edit option until very, very recently, because they wanted you to send more messages, I guess.
Yeah,
that would be maybe abusing
abusing the North Star. Yes.
I would like to hope that's not the reason, but they had technical challenges in editing.
I need to clarify the last one with another one.
Yeah.
So.
Yes.
But yeah, you pointed a good point. No metric is perfect. Some metrics might be gamed.
Exactly.
But it's better to actually aim for a simple and understandable one than one that is like this very well-crafted formula that no one understands except someone in finance.
Super abstract. Yeah.
So this is an example. There's other examples. At YouTube, for example, we switched from videos viewed per month, which was kind of pushing people to game the system, to minutes watched, because that's a better metric of how much content, useful content, is being found on YouTube and being consumed, and it's serving both the creators and the viewers, and so on and so forth. Once you have these two top metrics, you can break them into sub-metrics that create what I call the metrics trees for both, and that gives you a lot of what you need to put into OKRs, for example. A lot of OKR cycles fail because people just don't know what to choose. But once you have metrics trees, once you start tracking the numbers, once you start assigning metrics in the tree or areas in the tree to teams, there's already a sense of mission. There's always a local North Star metric where these teams can keep optimizing for a while. And for some teams, it will be about revenue. And for some teams, it will be about onboarding success rate. Whatever it is, it's fine. And that also aligns the organization because everyone is pulling in the same direction. These two top metrics, which usually overlap very strongly, if you selected the right mission and business model, are the things we're trying to succeed in, to grow. And that's attached to our mission, which is the kind of qualitative form of top objective. And I've seen cases where Team A was willing to let go of its ideas, its features or whatever, and join Team B because it was the thing that will create most impact as measured by these two top metrics.
That's amazing.
So that's the goals layer.
So that's the G, right?
That's the G in GIST, exactly. Okay. The ideas layer is about collecting a lot more ideas than we do right now, because we tend to kind of limit ourselves to what we think about, but being really open to the market, to the customers, to the users, to new technologies, to things that come from the bottom, because often the best ideas come from the engineers, I'm sorry to say, or a lot of times. So letting anyone surface their ideas. We don't judge the ideas by where they came from. We're willing to evaluate anything. We're doing research, but then being very pragmatic about how we discuss the ideas. The anti-pattern I see is people locking themselves inside the conference room and debating which idea is best for ad nauseum. It's like an endless debate, and everyone has their own opinions, and everyone's not listening to the other person. You've been there, right? Yep. And eventually we create a roadmap. Everyone's very, very tired from this. Everyone wants to finish this discussion. That's the roadmap. Let's get on with it. Instead, I suggest that first off, as much as we can, push the discussion to the team level. The goals need to be determined with the managers, with the stakeholders, etc. But then the teams need to collect the ideas, surface them, and evaluate them in a very, very transparent and objective way.
Now, let's be clear about team. When we're talking about the team, we're talking about the actual team that eventually will also deliver the product.
That's correct.
So it's the same team. We're not talking about a different team or anything. So it's the designers, it's the product manager, and it's the engineers.
Yeah, typically up to 10 engineers with their designer and their product manager. Could have other people involved, data scientists or data analysts.
Of course,
user researcher, even a PMM that is involved. They can all
QA, like anyone that needs to deliver the end result, not just ideas.
Exactly.
Mhm.
This is kind of the empowered team model, which is debatable. There's no evidence this is the best model, but it does seems to be the most scalable model, and the one that leverages the knowledge that lives in the edges of the organization the best, because all other models are kind of centrist. They assume that the managers will know everything and make the best decisions, and this has turned out to be not the case in so
Yes.
many examples. So in this model, we agree on the goals. The goals of the teams are derived from the goals of the company as well, or they are allowed to create their own goals as well, bottom up, but there's also a top-down element. And then they start collecting ideas through research, through all of these methods, and they put them into what's called an idea bank. That's one process, not the only one, but just the one I'm dealing with in the book. And then they use ICE, impact, confidence, and ease, to evaluate these ideas. Now, ICE or RICE, which puts reach into the equation, is very popular and also very misused, very often misused. I've seen this a lot. People just throw numbers for impact, confidence, and ease. Yeah. And that's one of the things I try to go against in the book. I try to explain how I think impact should be evaluated. And ease, which is kind of the opposite of effort. How do we put the effort into the ease into a scale of 0 to 10, the impact to a scale of 0 to 10. In my workshops, I teach various methods to do this and hands-on, but I also give examples in the book. And the most important element there is the one that is usually misused, and that's confidence. It's really easy for us to convince ourselves that this idea will have an impact of 9 out of 10, so it's a game changer. It's really a very good idea, and an ease of 3. So that makes it very easy for us to go ahead and launch the feature because it sounds like a good investment, right? Unfortunately, we're often wrong. There's a lot of statistics to that, and most of our ideas actually don't succeed when we test them. And there's a lot of statistics coming from A/B experiments, for example, or from backwards analysis of features that were launched that shows that in most cases, 1 in 3 is the best case scenario. 1 in 3 good idea that actually moves the needle. And the other two-thirds are waste. You're just bloating your product, you're just investing, and the customers and the business are not gaining anything.
Yeah.
Does confidence include the confidence to actually create and build something, or is it just focused on the confidence of releasing it into the market and people are going to use it? Does it encompass both spheres?
So the way I interpret confidence, and that's not my invention, by the way, that came from Sean Ellis, a guru in growth marketing, who invented the C element in ICE. It's our confidence in the I and the E. How sure are we it's really a 9 out of 10 and a 3 out of 10? What makes us so confident? And if you just say, yeah, I talked to 3 customers and they all felt that this is a great idea, how confident should you be? A lot of CEOs I've seen are super confident. That's it. They nailed it. Here's what we need to do for the next 2 years because of these 3 conversations. And I would argue that's anecdotal evidence. That's not very strong. We might just seeing a pattern in the noise. If a bunch of smart people sat in a room and decided it's a great idea, how much confidence should we get? If the leading competitor has this feature, how much? So there's all these various forms of evidence, and I try to put them on a scale. And I created a tool called the confidence meter, which is this graphic. It also has a spreadsheet you can download from my website as a calculator, and basically ask you a series of questions. Do you have self-conviction? You think it's a great idea? Even if you're Elon Musk, that gives you 0.01 out of 10, because every terrible idea that ever was, someone thought it was great. If you've ran through reviews, or if it aligns with the company strategy, that gives you a little bit more of confidence, but it's still opinion land. If you start collecting data and it's anecdotal, you just found a few data points, that gives you still, I think, around 1 out of 10. And by the way, I've seen so many cases where when the leading competitor had a feature and the team felt it was a good feature, or someone in management felt it's a good feature, that's it. Validation done, let's launch it. Unfortunately, it doesn't work. And the tool kind of encourages you to collect market data, which is based on surveys and smoke tests and fake door tests and all this good stuff and deep competitive analysis. And even further, to get to medium and high confidence, you need to test the idea, build a version of it, put it in front of users, and measure the results. And we all know that not all tests are as rigorous as others. So some fake door tests give you medium confidence, but if you do an A/B experiment, if you do an early adopter program, that's much more stringent, and that will give you much more reliable results. So the confidence level goes accordingly. So having these three numbers side by side helps do the important thing, which is not the numbers themselves, but the conversation that follows. So instead of having this very intense conversation that's based on opinions and politics and groupthink, you have a discussion about what is the impact, what is the ease, and how sure are we, and what should be the next step. And almost always for an idea that is big or risky, and especially if it's both, the answer is let's test it a little bit more to create higher confidence. Sometimes we can deduce we reach the right level of confidence, which is you need to stop discovering at some point. It's very important. And then you just switch to delivery. That's perfectly fine. But you have to have the discussion and convince each other and yourself that you reached that point. Otherwise, you are going to create waste. And we're not striving never for 100% confidence. That's impossible, but just the right level. And I try to explain in the book what that means.
Okay.
So that's the process of idea evaluation. That's the I. Any questions before I jump into the S?
No, it's excellent.
Yeah, go for it.
Cool. I feel like it's a monologue, and I want to give
no
you
worries. No, I think maybe you are preaching to the choir here. So it's we agree with everything that you say. So I wonder how a discussion goes with like a CEO or with an executive that doesn't like what you're saying.
Exactly. I was dreading this a lot, actually, until I started the coaching or presenting to executive teams. So, because sometimes the CPO or the head of product will invite me to hold a session like this with the executive team.
Because they know they need a change in the organization, and it's hard for them to do it within.
Right. And sometimes it's good to bring, someone from the outside with a foreign accent and with the Google credentials to say what you want to say, right?
Yes, exactly.
We all know this. It's hard to be, as we say in Hebrew, the prophet in your own town. They don't receive the message from you as much as they receive from an external expert.
Absolutely.
So I come and I explain to them exactly what I just explained to you. No simplifying it just for the executives. And they completely resonate with this. And they say, yes, we are having exactly these problems. And when I show them the confidence meter, that's why they love it the most. It's very repetitive, especially the CEO and the CFO and the CTO. And that's because they get so many requests for investment. Constantly people are coming and pitching to them, let's do this project, let's do the other project. And all of a sudden, here's a more objective way to evaluate whether or not it's not just down to their judgment. They realize they don't know everything. They don't want to be in this chair of just playing God and predicting the future always, unless some do, but they want a system. So they really love this too. And they really see the need for it.
Perfect.
Doesn't mean that they will change overnight and start playing by the new rules. Doesn't mean they will not try to subvert the system a little bit. I've seen all sorts of creative ways to do that, but definitely they get the point.
Change is hard for sure. Yeah.
Totally.
Is this where evidence like trickles into the GIST model? Like, is this where because you have ideas and you build confidence, but you need that data, that evidence to validate and build that confidence. So is this where the evidence really comes into it in terms of collecting data?
That's one place. It starts at the goals, because the goals basically call out what kind of evidence, what kind of metrics, what kind of changes in users' behavior do we need to see in order to know, or in business behavior to know that we succeeded.
Right.
Then it goes to the ideas level. When we do this evaluation, the first time people do this over their idea bank, they come back to me and say, we realize all of our ideas are at medium low or low confidence.
Yeah.
I said, great. What's the next step? I said, we need to do more research and we need to do more testing. Right. Exactly right.
Yep.
So the research is outside of GIST, but the testing that goes to the next layer, steps. And steps are about helping you generate the evidence you need, testing your hypothesis, and generating data, which you can then interpret and turn into evidence. So if you want, I can dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, let's head to steps. Yep.
So it's a common kind of conception that you do, or at least the way I see it in a lot of companies, when they do need to test an idea, they do need to experiment, they usually latch on to one mode of operation. It's either qualitative, they do a user study or usability test, or quantitative, they do A/B experiments if they can, but it's rarely both. And even worse, a lot of them don't use the much cheaper ways to generate early evidence that enables you to eliminate a lot of ideas much more quickly. So you're always stuck in this model where we need to build something pretty elaborate before we can get the first hint of whether or not this is a good idea. And at this stage, you get into the sunk cost fallacy. So it's very tempting to keep building because we already chose this thing and we already have something working. So what I try to teach in the steps layer is that basically you can start evaluating ideas already on paper, or you can start evaluating them based on some simple questions. You can start evaluating them just by looking at your data. And all of these things are things that PMs can do, but they just don't do them systematically sometimes, or they're not evaluating them enough. And they give you a little bit of confidence. If you look at the confidence meter, these things exist there. They don't give you full, but the magic thing is once you start doing this evaluation, these validation techniques, and I show 28 there along 5 kind of major buckets: assessment, fact-finding, tests, and there are multiple types of tests, experiments, which are A/B experiments, multivariate experiments, and release results. So even the release itself can be a form of test. Once you start doing this, even in the early assessment and fact-finding phases, you are already able to eliminate a lot of ideas, to park them. You do the evaluation, you come up with some numbers that lifts your confidence a little bit, not enough to say, let's go and build the whole thing, but enough to say, this doesn't look as promising as we thought. Let's park it for now. Maybe we'll pick it up later, but for now, not one of the candidates.
So maybe part of it is a mindset that people have to switch their mindset, not to prove what they want to prove, but to disprove what, or not to prove what will work, but to disprove what will not work. So it's easier, or it costs much less to say this idea is bad than it costs to say this idea is the best idea.
What you just described is what the statisticians call the null hypothesis. So basically, the default hypothesis is it doesn't work. The change will not create the behavior you expect, and the research backs this up. And what you need to test is that it actually does. So if you run experiments, for example, and you see no results, you shouldn't assume that's because the experiment was bad necessarily, or because seasonality or whatever excuse you can come up with.
Or you got the wrong people, or it's not,
Exactly. You shouldn't move the goalposts. You just should assume this idea was not as strong as you thought. It's a really hard thing to let go of our favorite ideas, but that's how science works, honestly.
And it strikes me the more, over the years, more and more, how similar what we do is actually to the scientific method. And people don't realize that that's what we have to adopt, the scientific method, because for some reason, people are, opinionated and they want their ideas to be the best ideas and whatever. So they just ignore that you could actually be a scientist about it.
Ignore the evidence, right?
Ignore the evidence.
I mean, and it's not just science, honestly. It's also law. It's also medicine. Imagine that you went to your for based on opinions will decide what you have. No need for a lab test, no need for an MRI or anything. Just, I feel that you have this disease, so here's some medicine. That will be unethical, right? And product, that's daily practice. That's basically what we do pretty much all day long. I'm not saying we should park human judgment at all. For a lot of daily decisions, it's actually perfectly fine, and we don't have the time to test and to evaluate everything. But definitely for the big things, the new features, the new products, we have to be a little bit more scientific or a little bit more evidence guided. That's the core premise of this book.
Right.
That's excellent.
Awesome. So we covered now steps, which is collecting. What do we have to do to collect evidence?
Right.
And then the last step is tasks.
Yeah.
How to get it done, right?
Exactly. So it's like you can do all of this fancy work, but unless you do the work, nothing will happen, right?
Right.
And then when you go to the task layer, for me, tasks are the things we do on a daily basis, the things we manage in Jira and Kanban, the tickets, the user stories, all this good stuff. And there's a big challenge there as well, because a lot of teams, I don't know how much in the State, I mean, I have a good sense, but definitely in Europe or in Asia, I see this. A lot of teams are very focused on execution, on output, on delivery.
Yeah.
And inadvertently, Agile pushed them in this direction. That wasn't the goal of the Agile manifesto or the originators of Agile, but that's what ended up happening. And they became more and more delivery teams or feature teams. It's like, tell us exactly what we need to build in excruciating details, and we will deliver it. We will spend
feature
a lot
factory.
of, yeah, exactly. We'll spend a lot of time evaluating the scope, and then we'll go into a sprint. You cannot disturb us mid-sprint. Did you guys experience any of this in Canada or the US?
I must admit, I preached it myself before I realized what I was doing.
Oh, okay. So you were part of that.
We were part of the problem.
Agile brought amazing things. I worked in the days of Project Waterfall, so Agile is amazing. However, it does bring the risk that the team gets detached from the broader context, from the needs of the users, the needs of the business, and is very focused on code quality, on delivery, on time, etc., and in very small horizons as well.
And believe me, I'm also all for Agile. It's just that people that practice Agile or teach Agile, they're limited only to the delivery and not to discovery. So they're limiting Agile to a very specific area that is wrong. It's basically wrong, and that's what they have to understand. And this is part of that problem as well. But
if you talk to the old school Agile coaches, the people that were really there from the beginning, a lot of them teach something else, and there's a reason for that. I can go a little bit into the history of Agile if that's interesting for you guys. Probably you know it, but back in the day, a lot of the people who actually wrote the manifesto were working as contractors. They were actually writing software for large organizations. They were just kind of getting onto their first digital products, their first websites, the first software. And these people just didn't know how to write requirements. They didn't know how to work with software teams. So after a long and excruciating process of writing a very detailed spec, then these organizations, the software houses were supposed to build them, but the big companies will change their minds and come back and start changing things midway. And it's this massive waterfall project that really went sideways almost always. So they got really tired of this, and they said, let's work with these people in a different way. Every 1 to 4 weeks, because originally the size of the sprint was variable, we will agree what's the next byte of useful code that we will deliver to you to test. We will agree what's in it. And you have this time to think about the next one, so you can be a little bit more agile about the requirements. But during this time, just don't stop us, let us work, and then we'll come back to you and we'll show you the thing, and then we'll decide. So that was a much more healthy kind of interaction. It really helped the clients as well. And that's what we should have adopted. So basically, they're talking about testing with the end customer, which was their client, every time, or with the users of the end customer, if they could arrange this. We completely parked this part of Agile. The Agile teams are not expected to experiment at the end of each sprint. It's very hard to do, honestly. A lot of sprints don't deliver actually something testable. It's just another increment of code. Kanban is a little bit different, by the way. I see less of this in Kanban. So the question now, you come to a team that is used to work in this Agile delivery mode. You tell them, we need to work in steps. We need to now focus not just on the delivery of the next sprint, but on this more concrete mini project that is about putting a prototype in front of 12 users in a usability test, or putting an alpha version or an MVP, whatever you want to call it, in front of 200 customers. Here are the key things we need to evaluate. Here are the hypotheses. Here are the key scenarios we want to cover. What can we build? Mm-hmm. It's a very different mode of work, and it's not all about outputs. It's more about kind of also achieving the outcomes. And in my world, they need to be responsible also for running the experiment, collecting the results, and even taking part of the analysis. I've seen Google engineers and designers do all of this, and it's much better, much more interesting for them.
Absolutely.
So the task there is, how do we bring this into their world? How do we create some sort of project management that is not just agile rituals, that is also around succeeding in steps? And a step may be one sprint, might be multiple sprints, might be half a sprint. Another interesting thing is, if you test an idea, it turns out not to be so strong, you need to remove the idea and all the steps you plan, even if it happens mid-sprint. So you need to be really agile at all levels.
And the steps are not about delivering something that will necessarily go into the final product. So you don't have to always deliver something for the end users. You have to deliver value. And if there is no value, you have to identify it and get rid of it.
Or to measure or to evaluate your hypothesis. So yeah, if you build a landing page for your idea, the feature is not even, there's not a single line of code, but you build a landing page and you test how people respond to the value proposition, how many click on the buy button. That landing page develops the idea, the concept of the idea, develops our understanding what the people are interested in. It is an increment of scope, but we may throw it away and build a better landing page in the future.
Yeah.
And the same is true for the usability test you will build. And the same is true for this alpha version. And the same is true even for sometimes for a beta. You need to sometimes back off and realize, I need to fix this. So you're always building to the level and quality, the scope level and quality that is required to accomplish that next step.
Yep.
And the investment has to grow with the confidence. If you start off by building the MVP while your confidence is very low, you're most likely going to create waste. If you start off with this very much cheaper test and then move on, you're actually doing the right thing. And surprising to a lot of people, that's actually a faster or more efficient way to achieve the outcomes. Everyone thinks that if you just put a team on it, 0 to 100%, just start coding, rush out. That's the fastest way to develop software. 100% capacity, just keep people coding. That's actually a great way to create a ton of waste. A much better way is to put these people to help you do research, discovery, and delivery only on the things that need delivery. And if you measure the time it takes you to achieve your outcomes, it could be drastically shorter. Sometimes with the output focus way, it's infinite, but with that, you actually can achieve your outcomes.
Yeah. Is that why bringing engineering into the ideation piece of Gist is vital? Like if you're doing the ideas, like going outside of product and design and program management, data science, whatever, but bringing the actual people in who are going to build the product or build the feature, that's why that's critical.
Absolutely. I mean,
I think it's actually the other way around. It's not bringing the engineer into the ideation, it's bringing the ideation into the engineers. So they're the one really responsible for that, rather than, by the way, come and help us with this.
Gotcha. I say this is a pluralistic world. I mean, a lot of great ideas come from founders and from the top. We shouldn't discount our stakeholders are in the field and they hear a lot and they see a lot. They can bring us amazing ideas. So just let anyone bring ideas. I see it this way. Inside the team, the leads, the PM, the engineering leads, and the UXer usually are very involved in defining the goals. The team should review them. The team should suggest goals or push back. But they're responsible for the goals. Then once we know what the goals are for this quarter, we need to involve everyone in collecting the ideas. Anyone should suggest, we can do ideation, we can do research, whatever it is, to fill up at least 3 to 5 ideas per key result. And then, of course, in the steps and tasks, it's the team. The team is doing these things, and they're not just sitting there and expecting someone to tell them what to build. Because they have the context, they understand the goals, they understand the needs, the ideas are coming from them sometimes. You don't have to dictate to them every pixel, which color it needs to be, and exactly the behavior and what's the definition of that.
Yeah.
That's the way I worked in Google. Also, I don't know, 60-70% of what I launched at Google wasn't my idea even. I mean, I was involved in the project, but people just did the right thing. They called me to their desk, they showed me stuff, they asked me, what do you think? We thought this will be a better approach. And 99% of the times they were right. I didn't think of it, but it was better. Sometimes I would push back and say, no, I think this misses the point.
Itamar is very modest over here because he is the one that actually brought to the world, or at least his initial inclination and idea brought to the world the separation of your inbox emails to the tabs where you have it like the main emails that you're getting and then all the other stuff. But in the book, he's actually describing how that initial idea created a whole project that probably took Google about 2-3 years to get into like what is the right way to actually solve this problem.
It was about a year, not 2-3 years, but
okay.
And the point of the
story. When I read it in the book, it seems longer, but you've been there. Yeah,
it's true. It was a long project, but
probably felt long.
Because we changed so much in the interface that it was very risky. We had to take our time and validate and run many steps. But the point here that my initial idea, if we had launched it, would have failed. Because of the help of the team and the pushback, we understood what the goal is. We came up with other ideas, and then we found one that was.
You understood the problem. You understood the problem. Your idea for a solution would have failed, but you definitely have inclination about there is a problem there.
Yeah.
We could talk about this forever, but what I would encourage people now at this point is just go and get the book and read it, because it's really Itamar does a great job in the book to describe the background, how he gets to that, but also the framework, and then also how the framework can fit into different type of organizations, from startups all the way to enterprise. So that sometimes is a challenge for organization, how do you scale and all of that stuff. We know what happened with Agile, and now companies try to scale and they became even less agile because of that. So that's also one of those challenges. So I'm really, I was glad to see that you explained that in the book as well.
Yeah, and there's also a chapter about B2B, B2C, multi-sided marketplaces, platform and services teams, and even hardware teams. What kind of adjustments they need to do to the process. And the last chapter is about adoption, how to smooth the adoption curve, how to do it with objections and challenges and so on. Yeah.
Are you looking to do an audiobook by chance?
I am. Yeah, that's next on my list.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, a lot of people actually.
I'm audio.
Yeah, a lot of people. Also, I published a book, but it's a fiction book. So some people were like, yeah, I really want to read your book, but I'm not reading, I'm listening. So so I'm sure you'll get that feedback as well. The book was just launched recently, right?
Yeah.
And the feedback you're getting so far?
It's very positive. Of course, I'm not objective, but a lot of people comment that it's very practical as opposed to other books they've read. It really helps them know what they need to do on a day-to-day basis.
Yes.
So they appreciate that.
Very good. So final question we always ask our guests, where can people reach out to you?
All right, so I'll answer in 2 parts. First, if you want to find a book, go to evidenceguided.com. Just one word. And if you want to find me, I'm at itamargilad.com. But if you're interested in any of these resources I mentioned, the confidence meter, the Gistboard, which is my project management tool to work with teams, the list of the validation techniques we mentioned across the 5 buckets, all of this can be found at itamargilad.com/resources. So I have a bunch of downloads you can get there for free that includes all of this stuff.
Perfect.
Excellent.
That's really great. And you're also on LinkedIn and I'm sure other places.
Yeah, for my site, you will find links to all of those.
Perfect. Very nice. And you're also talking around in different conferences all over the world. So I'm sure that our audience will be able to catch you also live in some of those. So if this is the first time you are hearing about Itamar or his book, and you are going to meet him in person, let him know that you heard about him in the Product for Product podcast.
Yeah.
That will be awesome.
And send our regards through live, because we actually didn't meet Itamar in person yet, but I'm looking forward to do that sometime in the future.
Same here.
Itamar, it was a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for joining the show. Thank you to all the listeners. Moshe, thank you. And we'll talk to everybody next time.
Take care
Thank
and
you.
peace, everyone.
Thank you to all the listeners. We really appreciate the feedback and support. Please leave us a review to help others find the show on Apple or Spotify or anywhere else you're listening to the show.